العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our reading of the book معالم الطريق في طلب العلم of Sheikh Sadhan. This week we're in the chapter where the Sheikh talks about طالب علم واستعارة كتب, the student of knowledge and borrowing or lending books. So now he's talking about etiquette regarding books, which is a topic the ulama discuss in their books about adab talab ilm. How does a student of knowledge interact with their books, other people's books, borrowing books, buying books? But this chapter, the Shaykh specifically highlights borrowing books. So he says, Hafidhullah Ta'ala, the act of lending books to a student is a form of spreading knowledge. And indeed, a borrowed book is like an arrow. Like an arrow. Just as the reward for an arrow is gained to the one who made it, and the one who shoots it, and the one who provides it, so too does the reward for a book accrue to its writer, its lender, its borrower, its printer, its publisher, if they intend thereby the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is important that the ulama mention, and we'll see there are different madahib, giving books, lending them. It's a type of hasanat. It's very important, especially if Allah blessed you to have those books. Muhammad ibn Muzahim rahimahullah said, the first blessings of knowledge is lending of books. So this is some statement the ulama mentioned. Awwal barakatul ilm, i'aratul kutub. But the first barakah of ilm is borrowing or lending out your books. And now the Shaykh said, however, lending books is not unrestricted. Rather, it has guidelines. So now he's going to teach us the adab and the dawabit of lending books. Because if you lend everyone your books, you're going to have no books. And people are going to take it from you. They won't return it. They will damage it. And it has happened. And we're going to see some examples of it. So here are some of the etiquettes. Number one, the borrower book must be beneficial and not harmful. Unless the borrower is aware of the book's harmfulness and is borrowing it to demonstrate its harmfulness or refute it. So the first benefit has to be a book which is beneficial, not a book of deviance or bid'ah. And if the person borrowing it still needs it, because he's doing like, let's say, some kind of academic study, as you find today, higher studies, they may go to the library of the Shaykh, get a book for his master's or PhD. It's a book of bid'ah, but he needs it to refute it. This is okay. But if the person is borrowing books to people, which is books of bid'ah, then in Islam you're not supposed to own those books unless you're an expert who knows their mistakes and to refute them. And people should be, if they get those books, should inform the people about them. That's why the ulama have a separate chapter about the books of people of innovation. So it must be a beneficial book. Number two, the owner of the book must not need it at the time of the loan. So the one who's borrowing it, he doesn't need it at that time. He's not using it, studying it, researching, reviewing it. The third one, the borrower must be worthy of lending. Meaning, they must understand the value of the book and feel a sense of responsibility towards its owner. However, if the borrower is ignorant of the value of books and only wants to borrow them to pass the time, or for friends of similar character or family members who don't appreciate the value of books, such as children and those who are uninformed, then it's best not to lend them. If you're faced with such a situation and there's no way around it, advise them and be consistent to take care of the book and return it as soon as possible. And this is because if you give your books to everyone who asks, you will lose your books. Because some people, they don't know the value of that book. It could be a rare print. It could be a book that is out of print. It could be one of those books that you bought when you were in your beginning study. And we're going to talk about down, the Shaykh talks about if you have notes in it. So whoever you give it to has to be someone serious. It can't just be anybody. And now the Shaykh said, if there are two copies of the book and the borrower is ignorant of its value, give them the inferior one. So that's the value when you have different taba'at. You give them the ta'ban one. The ta'ban copy, you give them that one. Why? Because he's going to lose it maybe. It's okay. And so sometimes when you have more copies of the books, and we're going to see that at the end, the ulama often buy many copies of the same book, depending on the print. That's one way to use those prints. You give them those prints. Now he says, if you have any notes on the inside of a cover of a book, so you as a student of knowledge, if you wrote some benefits, then if you're worried about losing them or you need them, you copy them down on a piece of paper and keep them safe so you can easily find them when needed. And this is because, we mentioned it before, but Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh, Abdul, he mentioned amongst other ulama they advise to write down your benefits in the front cover of your notebook or the book you're studying. So in the Ghilaf, when you open the book, that first page, you put all the benefits, each page where the benefit is. Some new books, they have at the end a special index for all the fawaid. But if you took a benefit in that book, page so-and-so or page such and such, there's this benefit, page such and such, this benefit, then you're going to lend someone the book, you might lose the book and the benefit. So he says you copy that down. And today's time, you can just take a picture of it. It's easier, just so you know that. So if you lose the book, at least you have those benefits. Maybe you can get another copy. Or the person returns it, at least you have those benefits you needed. Now he mentions the next one, which is, if you notice a borrower neglecting a book or delaying its return, be wary of lending it to them again. Don't make the same mistake twice. And this is because the believer is not stung from the same hole twice, right? The hadith. And this is because some people, when you borrow them a book, unless you remind them, they might have forgotten. And this is especially if it's a book of value you need it. So therefore, we can see a benefit that you have to be careful of just getting everyone your books. You have to pay attention to who is taking care of them. And also the fact that there's a time limit. Just like in the library, you have a time period. Same thing, you give them a time period, how long you can borrow it. The next point he mentions is to help you keep track of the borrowed books in your library. Keep a dedicated borrowing log. And in it, record the borrower's name, the borrowed book, and the date of borrowing. And for added recording, you can also include the borrower's phone number so you can contact them if the book is delayed. Again, this is going back to managing by the library. Another point he mentions, the etiquette, borrowers should also take care of the book while they are with it or have it, and return it promptly once they have finished using it. And they should also refrain from writing on its pages without the owner's permission. And we're going to come to this, that you're not allowed to write in someone else's book without permission. So if you borrow the book, your benefit, the manfa'ah that you get is qira'ah. That's it, reading. You don't get to put tadween fawaid. That's not your haqq. This is not your book. You just get to read it. So what do you do if you borrow a book? You read it and you put your separate notebook. And if you want to write a benefit in there, you have to ask permission. And this is important even when it comes to public books. You borrow from the library or something, the books in the masjid, you can't just write in it without permission. And this is unless you're the owner of the library or the person who's in charge. So this is important because some people, they borrow the book and then they just destroy it, right? Because the benefit you're putting is for you, it's not for the person who borrowed the book. And the next one he mentions, if you borrow a book and benefit from it, return it to the person undamaged. And if you become attached to it, leave it and protect and be protected from harm. And you would not have seen it. You would not have seen it were not to be fear of consequences. So he's saying here that if you did and destroy it, you have to find a way to deal with that. And this means that sometimes you're going to replace the book, or you inform the person, or you mention to them that what happened to it. For example, he says now a benefit. A second, he says that I asked Ibrahim Maymun as-Sa'igh for a book, and he told me, give me a collateral, and rahan. And so I gave him the collateral, right, as for the book. And I gave him the collateral, and he gave me lending the book. And this point of collateral, it's a way to hold the book's value. You give the person, for example, a watch or something valued. You hold the book. When you finish, you get it back. So this is the point he's trying to highlight. So I gave back to the book, and then he also with the collateral. طيب. So now he mentioned some lines of poetry where he says that Ali bin Abi Bakr al-Tarrazi, he says, "O borrower, now and be patient. Do not be excessive in your boasting for boasting or boasting of it." And he's essentially praising the idea of borrowing the books. He says here also, another scholar, he says in lines of poetry, if you lend a book, take pledge for it. And take up collateral and abandon shyness, for you're not accusing the borrower, rather you're reminding him of his obligation to return it. So that's the intent behind it. And I believe nowadays in some places they do that, in public libraries even, that they ask for something of value. And he says here, following this, I will also quote some lines from his teacher, Shaykh Sadhan's teacher, Shaykh Abdul bin Jarallah, rahimahullah, who said in his book, he has his kitab, Al-Thimar Yani'ah. He says in here that the article, he said, I read in a magazine about people who built libraries of other people's books, and they would borrow them and then not return them. And this theft of books spread under the guise of borrowing until it became known amongst the people of high social standing. Although this is an illegitimate and thieving practice, the early Muslims condemned it and established etiquette for borrowing books, and those who violated this etiquette were refused the permission to lend them again. And that's just a benefit that there are people like that who built a library from stealing people's books and by borrowing it. And even the hukum on that, we're going to see, does the person get a punishment for that? Because someone will say, I'm just taking ilm. We're going to come to that, inshallah. He says, now some other etiquettes. Respecting the book and taking care of its cleanliness. So just like the person who borrowed the book, or the borrower, the lender, takes care of the book by cleaning it, making sure there's no stains. If you borrow the book, you have to do the same. So that's part of the mas'uliyah. If you get the book, you have to take care of it the way that person lent it to you. Abu Hamid, he says, Ya Ahmed bin Tahir, Israfini, he says, and he's a jurist, that once he borrowed a man a book, and then he said, Abu Hamid, he saw that same man carrying the book, on top of it, carrying it some grapes. So later, the same man asked to borrow a book, and Abu Hamid said, come to my house. So he came, and Abu Hamid brought the book out on a plate and handed it to him. And the man asked, astonished, what is this? And Abu Hamid says, this is the book you asked for, and this is a plate so you can carry your food on. Means because that's you were carrying the books, the grapes on the books. And so you need a plate, right? Obviously, the Shaykh said the point is to remind the man of his mistake. That's not how you treat the books of knowledge. And this is a benefit that the books of ilm, you have to respect them, is from respecting the deen. Because now books of knowledge has a ilm in there. So that's why as Muslims you should not disrespect the books. Of course, some ulama discuss what about the haja. Like for example, can you put the book of knowledge on the floor? The correct opinion, if there's nowhere else to keep it safe, it's permissible. Right? But the idea behind it, if you could put it in raised place, this is better. Another example would be, can I sleep on top of my books? Well, if you're scared, you're going to sleep and put it aside, someone's going to steal it. Some ulama say yes, you can sleep on it as a pillow out of fear of theft. But generally, the books, because they have knowledge, we put them on the shelves, we clean them, we respect them. And this is because the ilm that's inside of them. And this is for the books of knowledge, sacred knowledge, and even the books of dunya even, because they have benefit. But imagine the books of ilm, right? That's very important. So this is the etiquette the Shaykh's reminding us, that that's how you're supposed to be with your own books, let alone other people's books. And this is amongst the etiquettes of borrowing, is that the book should not be returned altered, broken, damaged, or neglected. And if you do so, you'll be punished by being prevented from borrowing again. As some of the scholars did, means whoever damaged the book, he wouldn't be allowed to borrow it again. And he mentions here, right, a man borrowed a book from him, and he talks to one of the imams, and he returned after a while broken, altered, or tampered, bearing traces of stains. And then he asked to borrow another book, to which the borrower said, you didn't treat the first one well, so you're not going to get another one. And this is especially important, but because if you stain the book and you damage it, maybe someone cannot benefit from it. He says, as for losing a borrowed book, then this is a major transgression in borrowing. Whoever commits it is not permitted to lend again. And indeed, one man expressed his regret for losing a borrowed book, saying, a prominent man from Banu Hashim in Basra lent me a notebook, and it was lost. And I was distressed by this, so I apologized to him, saying, O possessor of ever generous bounty and abundant blessings, grant forgiveness to me for confessing the sin, of acknowledging your pardon for what has been done. I lent him a note, so he's talking about here the lines of poetry where he apologizes to him for damaging or losing the book, And essentially showing the Salaf, they took serious pride in preserving the books and taking. And that time, they were not published books. They were published by hand, brothers and sisters. They wrote everything down. So imagine pages missing. These are serious things because someone spent time writing and recording it. Whereas today, we buy the printed book, you can order another one. But that doesn't mean we're not respecting the book because it still costs money. And he brings some other lines of poetry showing similar points, right, about the idea of people who lamented losing books or refusing to lend to someone who did so, because of course that shows the lack of respect for it. And then he finishes this section after he brings these different lines of poetry with the narration, but the narration has some weakness. The narration of Muhammad Ahmed bin Yaqub. This narration is in the Kitab Jami' Akhlaq al-Rawi of Khatib Baghdadi, number 481. Isnad munqati', it's a broken chain. So instead we'll mention, even Jama'a, he writes in Tadhkir al-Sami', he says in there, Ibn Jama'a rahimahullah, that it's recommended to lend books. Now Ibn Jama'a is giving etiquette. He says, recommended to lend books to those who will not be harmed by them and who will not cause harm to themselves. And some scholars dislike lending books. But the former view is preferable because it aids in the pursuit of knowledge. So we can see the ulama have two methods when it comes to lending books. Mani'un and badirun. Those who prevented and those who gave. And we're going to see some ulama, they didn't allow any books to be borrowed. Because it's their books, you get your own. And that's how they followed it. Another group, they used to give. Anyone who asked to give. We're going to mention some examples of those ulama. Now he said in Jama'ah, I prefer a view, qawl sahih, he says to give because it helps in talab ilm. In addition to the general virtue of reward associated with lending. Because lending books and giving those small acts of kindness is a type of ibadah. He says, now a man said, now to Abu, so he mentions now some narrations about this. Then he says, now continuing, the borrower should thank the lender. Now it's etiquette. The borrower should thank the lender and reciprocate the favor. Means if he asks for a book, he also gives him that. And he should not prolong his stay without need, but should return it when he has fulfilled his need. And he should not withhold it if the owner requests it or no longer needs it. And he is not permitted to repair it without the owner's permission, nor annotate in it or write anything in the opening and closing pages unless he knows the owner's consent. And so that's indication as well, that's etiquette. You can't do those things. This is the benefit. In this topic then, brothers, a lot of the ulama have written about it, so we just mentioned some fawaid regarding books in general, because we're on the topic. And the Shaykh Sadhan is going to mention later some of those benefits, but this is the end of that chapter. He only focused on borrowing books, but what other benefits are there connected to that? There are more. For example, buying books, owning books, right? And some ulama have written entire books, right? Entire books about books, right? Just about it, right? So there's so many fawaid, right? So some of those books are very interesting. About some of them even, right? What lengths they went to obtain a book. But since we're on the topic of borrowing it, like we said, the ulama, they are in two madhabs, right? When it comes to the book, some of them are the badilun, those who gave, and they didn't prevent anybody, right? So there are some examples of some of those ulama, like the Shaykh, one of the Imams in Baghdad, Abu Bakr Muhammad, and his name is Ibn Ad-Daqaq. He was one who they mentioned about him. He loved the people, all of them, and good for them, and he was a virtuous person, and I never seen someone like him. If anyone asked for a book, no one asked for him to borrow a book except he gave it to him or he indicated where to get it. So he was one of those people on that madhab that anybody, anywhere, he's either going to tell you, going to give you the book or he's going to show you where to get it. And the other ulama like this even now who are in that category, Hussein, Muhammad, Abdullah, Al-Tibi, another one, Shaykh Muhammad Hussein, Al-Ansari. Then there's other ulama who are on the other madhab who prevented, al-mani'un. And some of those ulama, they didn't benefit people with their books out of fear of losing them. They didn't want people to take their books. For example, Ibrahim Ahmed, Al-Shafi'i, and then there's others like this who had the view that you cannot borrow the book, you can only read it from them in their house or in their presence. So for example, As-Sakhawi mentions about Muhammad ibn Ali Al-Mu'addib. His nickname was Ibn Sakar. He says about him that he would not allow anyone to borrow a book, only read it in front of him or review it in front of him. He's not allowed to take it though. And this is from the angle of protecting their books, because again, the books have value. And then if you go to the kitab, Adab al-Shar'iyya, Ibn Muflih, he has a chapter, فَصْلٌ فِي بَدْرِ الْعِلْمِ وَمِنْهُ إِعَارَةُ كُتُبِهِ. Ibn Muflih al-Hanbali, rahimahullah, Ibn Taymiyyah's student, the great Hanbali scholar, he has a chapter, and his Adab al-Shar'iyya chapter, in spreading knowledge, and from it is borrowing books. Yeah, Khwani, some of us, that's the way we're going to do da'wah. Spending books by giving people books, borrowing them, and it's one of the best ways of da'wah. Either you give someone a book or you borrow the book. Right? Or if you want, that's one of the best ways, because a lot of people, they're not going to read a book. So what do? You give them a book. So out of reciprocity, it feels like I have to read it because you gave it to me. So that's one of the best ways to teach people the Tawheed. Just give them a book and say, okay, this is for you. And the person will be like, I can't read it now. I have to read it because you gave it to me. But also imagine today there's some people who you want to advise them. Sometimes you don't know what to tell them. And it's very awkward, very difficult. So what do? You just give them a book. Say, maybe you want to read this pamphlet or this book, and the person will get the message. But it's khayr though. Now he mentions in this chapter, Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah, he mentions in there, rahimahullah Ibn al-Jawzi, that Ibn Muflih cites him, saying that it's necessary for the one who owns books that he doesn't be stingy with lending books to the people who deserve it. So this is a good thing. Those who deserve it, not everybody. Those who deserve it. ينبغي لمن ملك كتابا أن لا يبخل بإعارته لمن هو أهله. It's not necessary for the one who owns a book to be stingy in borrowing it to one who is his people. Because some of us, we have many books in our library, we don't read all of them, or we've already read them. So how do you make use of them? You either review them or you borrow them. So you get that book will also get you hasanat. And also it's a way for the ilm to spread. And so if you go back to that chapter, he mentions some of those statements about the benefit of that. And Shaykh Salih al-Shaykh, we said he has a lecture on this. not just this topic, but all the topics called the student knowledge in his books. And we mentioned this before. In there, he has a chapter, etiquette number 5. It's also Arabic and English. It's audio or lecture, and then they transcribed it. It's called student knowledge in books. And then he has section 5, etiquette 5, lending books out to others. And he says, the Shaykh, from the etiquettes related to books, also is the manners of lending out books. Giving out books for people to borrow is not allowed unless you are giving them to someone that you trust will care for the books. And the reason for this is because you have the most right to your book, unless you find someone else that is in need of it, and who, when finishing it, will return back to you. Then he mentions some example. Qaadir Baghdad in his biography mentions that a man once asked him if he could borrow one of his books. So he replied saying, you have 3 days to use it. And that's the asl salaf, they would give time limit, 3 days. And so he says, the man said, that's not enough for me. So Qaadir Baghdad said, I've counted its pages. So you want to make a copy of it, then 3 days is sufficient for you. And if you want to read it, then 3 days is sufficient for you. And if you want to do more than that with it, then I have the most right to my book. Khalas, 3 days for reading, 3 days for writing. After you don't need it. And it's a good point, because just like the library, you don't get any, indefinite borrowing. You get 2 weeks, right? So this is a benefit as well, talib ilm. If you're going to borrow a book, you give a time date, because you have to get that book back. So many books were lost like this. And he said, this is correct, Shaykh says. Shaykh, since in the past, himself now, he said, I had lent the first volume of a large book consisting of 8 volumes to a brother. I don't want to mention the title of the book, since perhaps he might hear this. Shaykh saying this. And that I might be insinuating him. And now nearly 12 years have passed on, I still have not returned it. And Shaykh, brothers, we have to know he has the biggest library, right? Arguably in the Muslim world, some say in the whole Saudi Arabia, probably him and Shaykh Abdul Qaadir, the 2 biggest libraries. The libraries are like houses. And for Shaykh Qaadir's library, there's a car, he has a special golf car to go around to get the books. And that's how big it is. So with Shaykh saying this, we can probably imagine what kind of book that is and the value of the books that he buys. If you read about his biography, you'll learn a lot about him, about these books. And then the Shaykh continues by mentioning some of the Salaf even, what lengths they went to attain books. But he mentions after that now talking about losing books and the problem that he says Kitab al-Qawa'id ibn Rajab, Hafid ibn Rajab, Kitab al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya, he mentions in there that there is no capital punishment of cutting off the hand for stealing books. Ibn Rajab, he mentions this. And he says because if a person steals a book, then according to some scholars, then he cannot have his hand cut off. This is since there is doubt in it, because the truth is contained in there, and that's for everybody. And he's told ilm is for everybody, so it's not something khas. When the shurut of theft, you have to steal something that belongs to somebody in his possession that's protected. So this is not his, this is Allah, this is ilm. Okay, brothers, don't steal a book, astaghfirullah. It's not allowed. We just mention that point, because some people might get the idea now, but still not allowed. But this is just the bab of fa'idah. Then he continues on mentioning a story of one of the great imams. If you go to the end of the book, you can read it, brothers. This is very nice. It's not that long. In there he talks about a story of safeguarding the books. In summary of the story, it's a little bit lengthy, is that one of the imams in the past, Al-Qifti, rahimahullah, he has a copy of the book Al-Ansab of As-Sam'ani. Al-Ansab of As-Sam'ani, rahimahullah, the well-known book about different ascriptions, lineages, and things of this nature. So he loved books. Al-Qifti is well known to love books. So he mentions himself that he bought it. He got the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th volumes, but he couldn't find the 1st volume. And it's all handwritten by the author. So he's talking about a manuscript here. This is a makhtota, literally, manuscript. So he said, I'm looking for it, this 1st volume, even though the Shaykh says it's 250 years between Al-Qifti and As-Sam'ani, in terms of the difference in time period. So the Shaykh said, continuing the story, that he couldn't find the 1st volume. He asked about it, he looked around, until one day, he said that he went, when he's at home, someone brought the vegetables to his house, and he looked at the back of that packaging and he saw the writing of Sam'ani. Imagine the 1st volume was used as wrapping paper for the vegetables. So he said Qifti ran then to the vegetable seller to ask him for the rest of it, and he said he gave it out to everybody else. And khalas is gone. So then he said here, the Shaykh said that he was so sad at Qifti, he spent 1 month mourning the loss of that book. And that 1 volume, brothers, 1 volume. And it's not surprising, because it still happens nowadays. He doesn't know any difference between that. But if you think about this, you can also see the lengths of preserving books, because this is how the Salaf and the Imams got us these books. And I want to finish what I'm talking about now, the importance of buying books. And Shaykh is going to talk about later, Shaykh Sadhan, he has a section in talking about libraries. The student knowledge should have the number of the local library or bookshop, calling them and to visit them often. That's from the job of talib ilm. When he has a free time, that's part of his free time, one of his recreation, You go book viewing or window shopping. And now, Qaadir al-Baghdadi has his kitab, he mentions his book, Taqeed al-Ilm. Page 176 and 179, chapter Increasing Books. So if you go to that, Qaadir al-Baghdadi, brothers and sisters, we know he's the one that loves books. And he's never seen except walking with a book. Well, never seen except he had a book wherever he was. But he has in this kitab, Taqeed al-Ilm, the benefits about recording knowledge, page 176 to 179, chapter about increasing the books. And in there he mentions many aqwal ulama about buying books even if you don't need them right now. And many of the talib ilm, that's the problem they have. They see a book, they say, I don't need it, I'm a beginner. Well, you're a beginner today, tomorrow you're not going to be a beginner. And you need to have it, and you might not get that book again. And it happened to so many people that they had a chance to buy it, then now they can't get that book, it's gone. Or they had the money today, and then tomorrow you don't have the money. So he says in here, some of the ulama have said, a person should accumulate various branches of knowledge, even if they're not already familiar with them, and should strive to acquire as much as possible. Okay, this is an argument for buying more books. And they should not consider themselves self-sufficient, for if they feel they can do without them at one time, they will need them at another. And if they tire of them at one moment, they will find comfort in them at another. And if they're preoccupied with something else one day, then they will have time for it the next. And it keeps going like this. And they should not be hasty or impatient, lest they regret and become anxious. And he mentions many other statements of many of the ulama who used to buy books as soon as they can get them. He says, someone once asked, why don't you sell me some of your books that you don't need? And he said, if I don't need them today, I'll need them tomorrow. And so another man sold a book he thought he didn't need. But then he needed a single word, and he went to the seller and asked to write that word for him. And the seller said, by Allah, you won't write for it less than the price of the entire book. So the man paid for him the price of the book just to get that word back. And other benefits like this, encouraging buying books and earning them and keeping them. And also, it can for some people be, number one, a type of encouragement. Sometimes you buy some books, you keep it later to encourage you to keep going talab ilm. So one day you will need it. And sometimes what will happen, you reach a certain level of knowledge and you go to your library and there's the book you're looking for. And now I need this book. And now I'm in this topic. Now there's a class in the masjid, they're studying that book. I already have it. And that's the benefit. We should try our best, brothers and sisters, to buy the books when you have the money and ability and to increase. There's no harm in that. Also, it can help your family, and some of the setup, they would have the books, and when they passed away, their families would benefit from it, either selling it or learning from it, or themselves having it as a resource. So that's that topic. And we finished with mentioning also, brothers and sisters, that if you read the biography of the ulama generally about their love for books, it will also encourage you that, because most of the benefit you can get is going to be from reading. And as Muslims, we're ummah of reading. That's how we're supposed to be. We have to read. So we also encourage brothers and sisters that we already mentioned free reading and these kinds of things. You have to have reading material. What are you reading? What's in your library? You have books, Arabic books. If you're reading Arabic, you have English books, other language, different types of subjects. You should have as much as you can. And also that will be a substitute from all kinds of distractions at home. Especially for our homes, many people say we want to get rid of the TV. Well, the best way to get rid of the TV, you have a nice library. And no one needs to stare at the screen anymore. Look at the nice library. It's all gold, right? MashaAllah. And the people are going to like it. And also what happens, you have time, we pull a kitab and we just read a benefit. It's very helpful. It's one of the easiest ways to change the dynamics of the home. And also it can also bring a lot of khair to your house, right? Because of the fact that you have them. So inshallah we'll end with this much. And next week we'll continue. Anyone has any quick questions? Yes, brother. I'll say it again, brother. So Masjid lending books, it's a little bit complicated because the question is what's inside the masjid, is it waqf or not? Is it an endowment? And so the correct view is what's inside the masjid, and often its equipment is considered like the masjid waqf in its benefit and also its usage. So for those reasons, a person shouldn't be giving out those kinds of books. This is preferable, and some of them they allow for permission, but it's better to just say read it when you're in the masjid. Since it's a waqf, that's the better way, and a person can just read it when they're there, inshallah. Allah. And also sometimes the books go missing, so that's a lot of the books in Masjid, you notice the books are missing in their entirety or parts of it because someone took it and didn't bring it back, right? Allah. Yes. So the best place to start with to build your library will be in your house in terms of books of Aqeedah, the books that you need to benefit from that you're studying or you already covered, or things that you need to begin with. So most of the times the brothers they bring books of Aqeedah, Tahara wa Salah, those kinds of books, and you build from there, slowly from there, getting the books that you need. And then from there you will get different books on different subjects. Maybe a class is opening, you get a book from there. Maybe you find a book about the biography of Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, these kinds of things. So that's how you will begin. But the point is, you just begin having it in your house. And sometimes without the library, also a lot of people, they don't have ways to continue researching a topic. So that's why even for bahth or research, you need to have a library to do some more. And obviously online is also a type as well. But at the beginning is to buy the books print. Print is preferable. Allahu alam. Yes, brother. Borrowing, but Wallahu alam. That's the research. Borrowing books and not lending them. I have to research. Wallahu alam. Yes, brother.
Does one's notebook take the same ruling as books of ilm in terms of making sure we put it in the right places, not taking it into the bathroom?
So the person's notebook is a book with knowledge. It takes the ruling of being respected. So the ulama say anything that is respected because it has in it either the Quran or a hadith or has itself value or sacredness. Sacredness is the key. Until some debate about Arabic, should it be protected or not, because the Arabic is the language of the deen. So general rules, if you have a book of knowledge or the Quran, you don't take it to the washroom unless there's a need. Where you're afraid if you put it outside of it, someone will steal it. So that's so you put it in a bag, for example, you have your bag, you don't want to hold it for you or put it somewhere, then as a hajj, you put it there and you keep it safe, just in an angle. Otherwise, you give it to somebody or you put it outside and you use the washroom because it has ilm there. Arabic can also benefit. You don't want to go to the washroom with that. Allahu alam. Yes, Sheikh.
People that say we don't need books because we have PDFs.
So some people say today we don't need books because we have PDFs. This is a debate nowadays amongst tulab ilm and stuff. But the values of the PDFs are useful in their own way, but the print books are their benefit in their own way. And then more benefit because the print books, they're usually, when you buy them, someone did a tahqiq of them, both in terms of the manuscript as well as the ahadith and athar. And what happens is there is no, usually very less mistakes, if not any, because they go through rigorous process. The books online, some of them when they're scanned, they're good, but the newest prints you will not be able to get, even though you have that. And sometimes what happens is people, they don't read the books online. So they'll just have them, they research with them, but they don't read them. So maybe the best way is you have both. You have some of the print ones you keep, you have to have, and then online you have some, because online you can search in them. That's the value that they have. But sometimes what happens, some of the ulama, they say you have to cross-reference because some of the prints, especially in the Maktab Shamila, a lot of mistakes. Someone typed it wrong, and then what happens, you just build a whole case of something that's wrong. So print is the best, and you can't compete with the print books because of the value of them. And in itself, it has a lot of qeemah. So we encourage that. But those who can't afford, then it's like tayammum, inshallah, inshallah. Those who cannot buy it, you can't afford it, then